Please be warned. Inspired by a true story, deals with crimes that may contain adult themes and violence, and is intended for a mature audience.
June 17th, 1971. 13-year-old girl is dropped off at a bus stop in Alvin, Texas. Never seen alive again, her body was found on November 26, 1971. Just a few months later, another body was found mere yards away. In 2011, a film was released that is focused on these, what would come to be known as the Texas killing fields, but goes in a wildly different direction. And truth is often stranger than fiction, and the Texas killing fields was indeed inspired by a true story. Welcome to True Crime for Cinephiles. This is inspired by a true story, a podcast devoted to keeping artists honest. And if you've never listened to our podcast before, first we discuss the overall details of the actual crimes. Then, after that, we discuss those facts, as well as the film on its own and how much of it was true versus Hollywood magic. Remember to please share this podcast with your friends and review us in the app you're listening to right now. If you would, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm Aaron Peterson, an accredited film critic for the Hollywood Outsider podcast and website. Joining me today are my fellow film critics and true crime devotees, Amanda Sink.
Hello, hello.
And John Davenport.
Hey, buddy.
Thought you died there.
I thought I did too.
That's not, maybe we shouldn't joke about dying on this podcast.
Hey. You
never know. I don't think John wants to be the next episode.
As long as we're not joking about any victims, I think it's okay. That's off.
And on top of that, if I was one of the next victims or, and became the topic of an episode, do you think how much this podcast would blow up then?
Finally. I mean, if you're willing to take the bullet.
I'll take the hit.
Don't. That part's probably not funny.
A literal or metaphorical?
Don't. It was a metaphorical bullet, never a literal one. So we're talking about the Texas killing fields, which is streaming on Prime. It's always subject to change, but really we're talking about mostly the true story behind that. And then we'll also talk about the movie. Who had seen this bad boy before? Raise your voice.
Not I.
This is the first time I checked it out.
Okay. I am curious. I want to know what your thoughts were of the movie taking out the context of what actually happens. Just rough.
That's an interesting way to phrase that.
When I watched it, I was kind of engrossed into the whole story. I really liked seeing Jeffrey Dean Morgan be Jeffrey Dean Morgan prior to him ever being Negan. I feel like after watching this movie, I feel like we got robbed of somebody who could have been greater and a bigger actor in Hollywood but somehow we missed it because he was excellent. He had my attention the whole time. This was also the first time Sam Worthington didn't feel like milquetoast in a movie or TV show that he was in, because he's always been, to me, rather boring to watch on screen. But this time he was really interesting. And of course, Jessica Chastain is just always great. The story was something I was engrossed in. I really just dug the whole feel and engagement within the movie, so I really had a good time.
Between Sam Worthington and Jeffrey Dean Morgan, you really do have a great setup from that standpoint because of their personalities and just how much presence they can take up on a screen. And I was actually watching an interview that Sam Worthington did about this movie, and he was talking about how he got there and all of that, and his inspiration from, the detective. And what I liked about what he said is when he was learning how to engross into the character, he's like, solving a crime isn't about making friends. We don't care about that. Like solving it's you're not here to make friends. You're not here to make everybody happy. None of that matters. It's irrelevant. And I was like, that should be the approach that you take.
That's pretty much every cop I've ever met. In varying degrees.
Yeah.
He lived that on the screen. He would just walk in a room and people were pissed.
I feel like the whole time he really wanted to be Russell Crowe in LA Confidential. He just couldn't get the part, That's how I feel.
Fair enough.
We'll come back to the movie because I want to save my thoughts because they probably aren't as positive as these two.
Well, no, what I was going to say too. So I like those two. What I don't understand is why we needed this, false narrative thing that Chloe Grace Moretz character has going on.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that because we got to get to the actual facts of what the Texas
Yeah.
Killing Fields actually means. And if you've watched the Netflix documentary, it really focuses on a small portion of it. There's a lot more to it than just that. And we're going to touch on a lot of it. So because there's so much of it, I mean, we're talking a span of decades, the minutia, the detail that we usually get into will probably be a little bit broader. And if you've never listened to us before, as I mentioned earlier, new episodes are released every 2 weeks. They can be found wherever you listen to podcasts or at thehollywoodoutsiders.com. You can typically hear episodes early by supporting the show at patreon.com/thehollywoodoutsiders. This particular one is coming right on the line because there's been so much going on. And what I mean by that is we're going to have to take a little bit of a sabbatical. I just want to make sure that the audience is aware of that. So stay subscribed. We're coming back. We're not going away anywhere. But because I've got I'm on the board of the Beloit International Film Festival that's coming up. And also Amanda and I both are going to the South by Southwest Film Festival in March, which we have to do coverage for and reviews and podcasts for that. We're just overwhelmed in terms of I don't have the time to do these cool read-throughs and write them all up and everything else. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. We'll be back in April. So the show will continue through summer as did the first season. We're just taking a little break. So that's a little more manageable around the film festival time. Fair enough?
Yes. Very busy. And Aaron flexed about how much work he does for the podcast, but he's not wrong.
I mean, it's not a flex if it's fact, right? That's just a fact.
No, you could that's still flexing. Yeah.
Okay. Would either of you like to take those two
Not
things
at
over?
all. Unless I can use ChatGPT.
No, you can't. John?
No one wants to hear me read.
Okay.
John's like dyslexia is not maybe beneficial for a full read through.
Yeah.
So as I said, it's not a flex, just a fact. So what I'm going to do now is give you some facts about the Texas Killing Fields. And with that, I say film and true crime fans alike are always debating how true their true crime is. Not everything is always what it seems. This is the true story behind the Texas Killing Fields. June 17th, 1971. 13-year-old Colette Wilson just wanted to get home. As her band director dropped her off at an intersection in Alvin, Texas, where her mom would later pick her up, Colette was expecting to see her family. She likely had dreams, ambitions, goals. Sadly, this was the last time she would be seen alive. Her mother, Claire Wilson, arrived at this intersection to pick up her daughter, only she was nowhere to be found. Colette had a friend that lived nearby, so Claire checked there as well. Again, Colette had not turned up. Claire checked their home. No Colette. Claire, like most parents, immediately suspected foul play and reported her disappearance to the police, who seemed unbothered by the disappearance. They chalked it up to Colette ran away, or perhaps she got involved in drugs. They did not take it seriously. At least not until November 26, 1971, when Colette's body was found near the Adex Reservoir. She had been murdered. This body of Colette Wilson was the first known case of murder in the Texas Killing Fields. For the subsequent decades, over 33 murdered female victims have been found in this location known as the Texas Killing Fields. Also, occasionally a man. This term and the story of the Texas Killing Fields is a lot trickier to decipher. Unlike so many of our past episodes, there is no assurance of the same killer or specific connections. This is a very broad term applied to a very specific area of Texas. If you're unfamiliar with this location, and why would you be? You are unfamiliar with this location, right? Well, anyway, it is around the I-45 corridor, southeast of Houston, Texas. Specifically, the term was coined initially to describe a 25-acre piece of land in League City, where numerous bodies of mostly young women were found. But why here? What is it about this location that became prime dumping ground for murderers of innocent girls and women? Well, it's a stretch of I-45 that is desolate. A lot of bayous, fields, quiet, lonely roads. With oil fields and construction, it attracts the drifter types that can float in and out without much notice. It is prime real estate for serial killers. Investigative reporter Lise Olson, who appeared in the Netflix series Crime Scene, The Texas Killing Fields, explained it quite clearly. I-45 dead ends into the Gulf of Mexico in Galveston, or Gulf of America to Americans, I guess. You tend to get a different kind of person, drifters. You get construction workers, the suspects in these cases were people who had already been convicted of crimes somewhere else and for one reason or another came to Texas for work, for construction, for example. And so it's an area of opportunity for people who are highly mobile. It's also a place where you can dump a body and run. Lovely. Many victims, many variations on their murders. Sexual assault, bondage, single victims, pairs. A couple was even found here. This area of Texas in the 70s and 80s especially seemed to be a training ground for vicious murderers. Many of these victims took years to be identified. Some took decades. Many young women were found dead in this area in the 1970s, and no one was even truly brought to justice for these crimes. In 1998, Edward Harold Bell, who was convicted for murdering a Marine and fleeing the country, admitted to killing 11 girls in this area, and remembered a few of them by name, including Colette Wilson. Unfortunately, Bell died in prison in 2019 and was never charged with any crime related to the Texas killing fields. Then there were probably the most notorious of these murders, the Calder Road murders, as they came to be known, as the bodies were found near Calder Road. It was April in 1984 when a man went to retrieve what he thought was a ball from his dog's mouth. As he drew closer, he could see what it truly was, a human skull. The skull belonged to missing cocktail waitress Heidi Marie Villarreal Fry. She went missing October 26, 1983. Laura Lynn Miller was 16 when she disappeared on September 10, 1984. Last seen at a payphone to call her boyfriend. Then there was Jane Doe, who was found during the search for Laura Miller, and she was finally identified decades later as Audrey Lee Cook, who was last seen alive in December 1985. And lastly, there was Donna Prudhomme, who was unable to be identified as well until 2019, and she went missing in 1991. These 4 women were found on the same patch of land near Calder Road in League City, each one nude, on her back, under a tree, with their arms folded, and each were placed within 1,000 feet of each other. Some detectives claim that this was posing the victims in a walking path of sorts, so that the killer could return and walk through the path to see each of their victims. There were also numerous suspects at the time, but the saddest was Robert Abel, a retired NASA engineer. Yes, Abel was actually part of the team that designed the rocket that put Apollo astronauts into Earth's orbit. But the area where the women were found was adjacent to Robert Abel's property, and of course that made him a prime suspect. In 1993, police finally searched his property and his home and never found any evidence of any wrongdoing. They combed through it all. They found nothing. No hair, no fiber, no blood, nothing. Yet the police persisted, as did the father of Laura Miller, Tim Miller, who became convinced Abel was the killer of these girls. So much so, he hounded him for years afterwards, even threatening Abel on his answering machine. Tim Miller would later come to regret this harassment. But it didn't stop. A detective swore an affidavit that Abel had the characteristics of a sexual predator, despite never having any evidence whatsoever of his involvement in any of these crimes. His ex-wives did come forward after their divorces to proclaim that Abel had a terrible temper. Though he never put hands on any of them, he did, according to one ex-wife, beat horses when he was in this state. But again, no further evidence was found, and Abel claimed one of his wives was actually the aggressive one, and the other one was making these claims because he cut her out of his will, and Abel had a substantial nest egg of money and land. An ex-girlfriend of Abel's would later state that one of the ex-wives had actually come to her and asked if she would talk to the police, but that ex-girlfriend stated she never feared anything from Abel and saw him only hit a horse when he was rearing, never beating it. Robert Abel once told Texas Monthly, who wrote an entire profile asking if he was a cold-blooded murderer, despite zero evidence and no charges filed. Abel said, "My life has been destroyed, my reputation ruined. I didn't kill any of those girls. I wouldn't know how to kill." Robert Abel felt targeted by the police and refused their lie detector tests as he did not trust them anymore. But he did agree to 2 lie detector tests with outside parties, and he passed both of them. Robert Abel was harassed so much, he finally decided to give up his lease on his 1,000 acres, sell his cattle, and move most of his horses back to the family ranch near Belleville. His life in League City would never be peaceful again. In fact, his life would never be peaceful again. Even though he left League City, these accusations followed him until his death. And in 2005, Robert Abel drove his golf cart into the path of an incoming train. Suicide or accident? You decide. But there was never even one shred of evidence that Robert Abel killed those women. Justice did eventually come, though, for one of those women not on that list off Calder Road, Ellen Ray Simpson. Last seen July 29, 1985, in League City, where she told friends she was going swimming with Clyde Hedrick. I just want to point out, I feel like no one should be visiting or having fun in League City. Ellen's body was found later under an old couch in the remote woods off a dirt road in Galveston County. In a weird course of events, Clyde Hedrick was questioned by police later and stated Ellen drowned while they were swimming, and he panicked and he left her body in the middle of nowhere. So in 1996, he was convicted of abusing a corpse and sentenced to a year in jail as they could not prove Ellen was murdered at the time. Until a few years later. In 2014, after her body was exhumed and it was proven that Ellen had indeed been murdered. Hedrick was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He is now out after serving his time for that crime. Now, some have pointed to Clyde Hedrick as a possible killer of the other women, including old Tim Miller. But again, there's no evidence of this, or even a connection to these other victims. Hedrick has a long list of other offenses, but the connection still remains to be seen. Tim Miller used this pain to found Texas EquiSearch, Search and Recovery. Texas EquiSearch has assisted in thousands of cases throughout the U.S. and abroad, giving some form of resolution to distraught families and closure. He made some good off his pain. And that brings me to wrap this story up in some manner. It's hard to do, because this is not one case. The Texas killing fields is not a single, nor even a few cases. The bodies continued to be found on this desolate stretch of I-45 until the early 2000s. It is an area that spanned miles and decades. Bodies of innocent women, and occasionally men, have been dumped, discarded, and disposed of as if they were nothing more than the weekly trash. And even somehow claimed a retired NASA engineer just by living close to where these bodies were tossed. So many tragic stories, so many lives shattered, so many families without answers, still. When I was writing this for this episode of Inspired by a True Story, I realized this is not an episode where I can happily tell you the killers or killer were brought to justice. I cannot share a clever thought about what might happen to them in prison when they finally face retribution for the hell they put everyone through, especially those innocent women. Unfortunately, for many of these over 30 murders, justice is never coming. These cases might never close. It's just stating a fact. We all still hope, pray, plead, whatever entity you believe in if you believe in one. We hope and pray to them that they eventually catch these killers or a killer. And what that means is simply this. These vicious, vile murderers are still out there. They could be your family, your friends, your neighbor, or they could simply be deceased. Either way, they will have gotten away with it, with all of it. And that is the saddest tragedy of it all. Well, that brings us to our discussion on the Texas killing fields, the true story. That is a hard one to talk about because it's literally over multiple decades. And I kind of want to start with how it started, how these bodies started piling up in this area. And apparently serial killers just thought this is the spot because this is obviously multiple people. It's not just one serial killer. There's a lot of bodies being dumped in these areas.
Well, clearly it worked out for them for a while. So, and some people never been caught.
Yeah, most of them haven't been caught or charged anyway.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. Many of them did not get caught or charged. They haven't even finished identifying a lot of the bodies yet. But the thing about this area is that you run into a lot of different jurisdictional issues, and it's just in this like gray area where so many people overlap or don't do anything about or don't know how to do anything about. Especially in the 70s, they're not communicating with each other as much as they are, let's say, today. It's like a perfect storm of don't go there.
What I find fascinating is usually with these cases, you have at least a hard, fast killer. Maybe not identified, but it's probably the one person. There's so many, it's just hard to break it down and really just kind of what do you focus on? And, I know you guys, we were talking before the show that a lot of this lingo comes from the 80s and being named after the Killing Fields movie and kind of like renamed the Texas Killing Fields over the Calder Road murders, which is what the Netflix documentary focused on. Anything you want to add to that?
There's different numbers as far as varying ideas as to how many victims we have here. Like the FBI and local police are saying it's 30 plus. Texas Monthly, we're saying 30 to 40. There's a lot that goes on. And unfortunately, there's just no way to cover all the cases that are involved here. It's scary just to know just how much is being lost in the time and information. And cool thing that I see that's coming out lately is with a lot of the genetic genealogy and how they're actually using it to catch some of the criminals involved in here, or even help identify the missing persons that they found.
Yeah, we've talked about that in past episodes. I mean, that's how they call it the Golden State Killer. And I assume that there's going to be a lot of people that are caught this way, maybe after the fact and down the road, and maybe they're after they're deceased. So I don't know if there's really any calm for victims with that, knowing that they have to live their whole life. I mean, victims' families and whatnot, living their whole life not knowing. And then there's finally some closure, but it's after the assailant is dead. I don't know if that's closure, but I'm sure some people feel just to have anything is good.
Yeah, I mean, so speaking to the documentary series on Netflix or limited series, whatever you want to refer to it as, it does a great job of kind of what you were mentioning, focusing in on some of the families that mostly had like tie-ins and connections to each other and prompted, through headlines on newspaper articles and things like that, coining the Texas killing fields, because it was a spot where no one could hear you if you're yelling. There's nowhere for you to go to. There's nothing out there except for a church that somehow never heard people's bodies being dumped. I don't know. I'm starting to get a conspiracy theory about it. Just kidding. That's a joke. But the series doesn't...
Let me insert laughter. Ah!
Nah.
Is that... I just want to make sure you
You're
know.
Such a jerk.
I appreciate you.
It's because I gave him an offline comment that on the Hollywood Outsider podcast, he didn't laugh at my joke. So
I'm going to start adding a laugh track for everybody.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Adding the Amanda laugh track, that'd be great.
No, I'm gonna. If I do it, it's for everybody all the time. And he's like, that was
just
funny.
A sitcom.
Okay. Yep. Exactly. It's just like in Big Bang Theory, where I'm like, why are they laughing at that?
I want to press the button. Actually, John wants to press the button.
Actually, you know what I'll do is I'll add that laugh track at very inappropriate times.
Stop.
So
don't do that with this podcast.
You'll get canceled. This show will cancel you. Because why are people laughing at this horrible thing that Amanda said? Continue.
But yeah, so for the documentary, it's giving you more insight into the experience of the families, the failures of the system, and how in this time frame you start to get into the potential possibility of being able to track these killers down. And yet you have police departments that are just saying like, oh, well, she probably just ran away. And to me, that was the pieces where I was like, okay, I get to learn more about the evidence. I get to learn more about what didn't happen, like interviews with the creep himself, like all kinds of things. And you learn about the women and their stories, what they were doing with their life. That was really cool. But you're right, it doesn't showcase the entirety and the depravity that is there when you have people's bodies just being dumped like it's a trash yard for 30 some years.
Mm-hmm. It's just,
the lack of care concern for somebody's like, yeah, I mean, I get it. They murdered them. They did some really horrible things. So obviously they don't have a great soul, but you could be a little bit more respectful with the body.
I mean, it's murder, Amanda. I don't,
it just makes it extra worse when it's like they're treating them like a literal piece of trash.
Does it though? I mean,
it does.
What is the line? I think once you kill someone or do some of the horrible things that were done, I don't. At that point, you've already sunk as low as you can go. I don't know if there is any point where you can go lower than that. You know what I mean? I mean, I get what you're saying. You're saying like at least treat them decent or as people or as human beings, but these are not people who think of them in that manner. They think of them as trash.
Yeah, and just a lot of failures along the process that allowed more women to die, more women to go missing. And I think that's the other key piece about the story that is crazy and makes it even scarier. Like John pointed out, we don't really know how many women have died or how many people have died.
How many bodies are out there, really? There still are probably.
But there's so many people who went missing in the area that kind of semi-match the profile, which is a little broad and vague. It's like 12 years old to like 30-something, I think, or 20-something. So and let's, not anything super defined.
Let's not mince words. Like in the 70s, it seemed very clear that there was a serial killer operating in this area. I mean, it seemed a lot of the cases were very similar types and situations and circumstances. That seems very much like a serial killer. Calder road murders, they seem connected. He was never charged. I'm not going to point a finger to someone, I'll let Tim Miller do that. Guy likes to do that. And so I'm sure some of them are definitely connected. But what I don't, please don't take this as light, but it's going to come across as I mean it light, but I don't. I mean, did serial killers just have like a message board that they communicated? Hey, 45 is where you want to go.
Seriously.
I mean, was there like a pager notification or something at some point?
Well, part of me wonders, and obviously like communication was very different back then. It's not like you can just call somebody up and be like, hey, did you hear about this on the news? And so, yes, like the initial disappearances and murders were all happening like basically back to back, months within each other in multiple bodies. And it's like, whoa, what is going on here? And then obviously that takes hold. So I'm like, maybe the communication got out about the story and they're like, But my thing is, if people knew about it, if it's on the news or something, why would these bodies were already found. Why would you use the same area knowing that now
there's nobody there?
Law enforcement is going to pay attention.
Here's one thing I will tell you about that. So I have driven this stretch of I-45. I have.
Oh, have you?
I have. It was in the 2000s, but I have driven down the stretch. Now it's a little more built up, but it's still a lot of desolate areas. I mean, I think you used to live in Texas, right? Yeah. There are certain areas of Texas where you can see miles away. Mm-hmm. Right? You know what I'm talking about? Yep. It's so flat.
Especially West Texas.
It's flat. There's no trees. You can see everything miles away. So you could theoretically take a body out in the middle of nowhere and you would see headlights coming from miles away. You would always be tipped off if you really travel the area even somewhat frequently. It's great for that because of that. It's in the middle of nowhere. No one lived there. You could see from miles around. So if a cop were to come there or there were to be cars around, you would likely see them.
That's true. I didn't even think about that.
You would think that eventually there would be like, hey, could we put like a duty station or something out here so that, can we move out a whole bunch of those stadium lights and just like in the middle of the night, just turn those like shink and turn those stadium lights on so that there's like light everywhere?
You would think. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, they actually did put more law enforcement eyes on this area much later into it. And then bodies were still getting turned up.
Yeah, they just went to different areas. They just went further away.
They have certain people that are convicted or strong suspects. But the one person that I feel bad for when I look at this case is Michael Lloyd's self. They've pretty much decided that they've posthumously, and you have to use that word because the poor guy died in prison, but posthumously decided that he was wrongfully convicted for two of the deaths that are involved here. But if you look at it, how many people got tied up into the investigations that had no business being tied up in the investigations? How many people's names got dragged through this that had no business?
But they didn't prove it, though, the way I understood it, right? They just stated that they thought he was wrongly convicted. Is that right?
Are you talking about Clyde?
No, they're talking about Michael. He's talking about Michael Self. Yeah,
Michael Self. His confession was inconsistent and contradictory. So he confessed under duress. The police chief spent some time with himself to get him to confess. His confessions turned out to be inconsistent and contradictory to a lot of the informations of the case, and he then later recanted.
So let's talk about the two guys who were convicted. The first one was Mr. Bell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Edward Harold Bell, as I talked about in the read-through, he was convicted for murdering a Marine and fleeing the country, but was a suspect this whole time. He was known to pull his pants down around women. He had some issues. And he admitted to killing 11 girls in this area and actually remembered a lot of them by names, including Colette Wilson, who was the first one. Now, he died in prison.
And took them to the locations of bodies, we should point out.
Just saying, but he was never charged. They never charged him, and he died in 2019 in prison. So is that justice? Is that justice?
And he knew. I don't know. No, absolutely not.
And he knew what? Which part?
He knew some of the women. Like, he knew them personally. Like, he had met them and interacted with them.
I mean, he seems like a very likely suspect.
Yes. I mean, if someone tells me, hey, I buried something, and they're like, oh, where is it at? And it's like, it's a treasure hunt. You got to figure it out yourself. Well, I don't know where to go. Oh, well, I buried it. Let me take you there. And then I find the treasure. Guess what? You're the one who buried the treasure then, or you found a way to the treasure.
Well, that's one part. The other part is awesome treasure hunt. You just rigged this thing from the inside. Well done. Well done, One-Eyed Willie. Well done. Yeah, so sadly, no justice there. Now, the other one, the one Netflix covered pretty deeply, and Tim Miller has said strongly that he believes is the culprit behind several other murders, but has never been charged. He's only been charged with the one, was Clyde Hedrick, who is now free. He's out of prison. He's in, I believe, a halfway house, the last I saw. I get where Tim Miller's coming from. That he believes that Hedrick murdered his daughter, Laura Lynn Miller, and, I talked a little bit about that in the read-through as well. And I will say, all I want to say about that is because I don't know, but I understand where he's coming from, and I can see why he feels this way and why it makes sense. But on the same token, I'm taking the good with this, and the fact that this has prompted him to start that Texas EquiSearch is amazing. I mean, where he just
a lot of good stuff.
Goes and just keeps giving back to the community. And I know he's driven for a reason. I understand his reason. I completely empathize with his reason. That's something I can say out of all of this hell, that's one good thing that came out of it, is Tim Miller. So what do we think about Hedrick? It's tough, right? Because
it is.
He's never been charged with any other crimes. He's never been charged with any other crimes.
Well, I mean, he was charged for Ellen Beeson. That's what he went to jail for.
Well, just that one, though. I'm saying, like, no other crimes outside of that. Mm-hmm. He was just for the involuntary manslaughter.
But in the same token, like, there are some things that lend to the potential for it. There's pieces of the evidence, but more than anything, I think I think how you determine if he's responsible or not is you have to determine if Ellen Beeson's case was part of it. If it was part of the same.
Is it connected?
String of murders. Yeah. And that's the hard part because he might not have, he didn't have the same connections. It seemed much more randomized if they were that case versus the original potential serial killer. Michael, he at least knew some of them, right? Like that changes things a little bit.
It does, and very much so. It also can be very difficult, and I understand this because we've had so many cases that we've talked about in the past where people get fixated on certain people for their reasons, right? It is very possible that there's just enough to make people think that there's a connection when there might not be with the other ones. You got to have hard evidence to prove it. Like you said, you have to be able to connect them. And so far, that connection doesn't exist. It's just coincidence at this point.
And man, Tim Miller, forgive me for not remembering the guy's name, but he was like a neighbor. He's the one who owned the land that Laura Miller was found at. Mm-hmm. And he went after that guy so hard that the dude literally moved to Florida, said, I'm up out of here because I can't live my life anymore. Everyone in this town thinks I did it. I think he ended up taking his life because he couldn't deal with it anymore. But I guess Tim Miller did get an opportunity to apologize to him because he realized, actually, this guy didn't murder all these people and my daughter. Oops. And I'm like, that's a pretty big to make. Because he was harassing this guy. He was calling and leaving messages. He's like, I'm going to have this person, basically threats. I'm going to have these people come out there and find you and whatever to you. So he was literally torturing and harassing this guy who inevitably ended up being found to not be guilty of this.
Man, now I got to take back my yay Tim Miller speech. Really? I mean, good for Texas EquiSearch. But yeah, I totally forgot about that. I did forget about that.
Super icky. But I mean, people make mistakes. And there was...
No. Hang on. We gotta put a line on that. No, that's not a...
If my kid was found dead on your property and a bunch of other people were found dead on your property, I'm definitely going to look at you.
I get that, but you still... I mean, at least he admitted he was wrong. I don't know. That's tricky. What do you guys think? Listening, what do you think? Should he... does that lose him a little piece of that hero status? I think it probably should, because the man had to take his own life. He had to move. He had to give up everything he loved. And he did nothing except...
His business.
Yeah, his business, his life, literally. He felt like he couldn't even go on because no one believed he was innocent. Like, the whole community thought he was guilty because of this. Mm-hmm. Not because the body was found there, because he owned, quite a bit of land. That's what people do in Texas.
The land, and he had the horse riding business that went through similar areas.
Right.
So there was those connections is what initially prompted it.
Damn.
Was that Abel?
Yep.
Yeah, Robert Abel. He was also a NASA engineer. That's crazy. This guy is...
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
And that part is really heavily covered in the documentary with Netflix, too.
It is, but I saw the documentary a while ago, and I totally forgot about that. That's just, yeah.
That is a little icky to sit there and, like...
Drive a man to kill himself, yeah.
Yeah, drive a man to kill himself like that. That is a little icky. A little icky is kind of like a terrible way of saying it, but...
I do understand. I mean, it's okay. I'm a dad. I probably would totally ruin people's lives. Yeah. I understand both sides of this argument. How's that?
17 months, your kid they're just missing. And then you find their body in old boy's land. And you're like, that seems like a very coincidental thing for someone to know where to go.
There's a likely chance if I even just felt maybe they'd probably disappear. So I get where some of this can come from.
Very wrong. Doesn't take away from the illegal wrongness of harassing someone.
Illegal wrongness, no.
Yeah. Both
are wrong in this respect. Well, no, he's not wrong. Poor Abel, that poor guy. He's nothing wrong with him. He just happened to own land. He happened to be successful, and that's what it did to him. That's why I say fail, kids. Just keep failing. Just keep failing.
I don't think that's a message to go away with.
Works for me.
Just keep failing. Well, we may never know, but I agree with John. I think over time, we'll probably get some of these solved through genealogy and DNA testing that way. That seems to be what will happen. You guys, anything more you want to talk about on the true case?
No, so we can move on to the movie if you want.
Oh, please.
This is literally my worst nightmare. That's all.
What? Just being ditched in the middle of Texas? I get it. Texas kind of sucks. Just kidding. I'm kidding, Texas.
The horrific manner. A lot of these women, they were just passing through something, and then their whole life was gone. And then their family got no closure. Some families still don't even know where their kids are. They're probably like freaking 80 years old, still waiting to figure out what happened. It's just so depressing.
It is. And a lot of this was during a different time. And I know, I'm not trying to point out your age, but I know you're too young to remember this, but man, in the 80s and the 70s, I was very young in the 70s, but in the 80s, I was full-blown kid/teenager. And I will tell you, it was a different time because we would totally get in the van. You know what I mean? And we would hitchhike, you do all
those
that stupid
lessons
stuff.
didn't come around until the 90s.
My God. I mean, look, on reflection, it's amazing that so many of us got out of it because there were horrible people apparently everywhere. Serial killers were literally everywhere. They're sharing freaking tidbits at the salon or something and saying, hey, I-45, that's where you want to be. I mean, they're actually like somehow communicating this. I mean, it's just an insane time.
Also, if you think about it, it's mostly just because Texas is so big, but man, they have some scary things because they're also the prime, there's a prime spot basically there for human trafficking as a source. Then you got these murder thingies and goodness.
Murder thingies.
Stay safe.
Can we just go back to murder thingies really quick?
No, let's ignore I said that.
They gave you a psychology degree? Really?
Yeah. B's get degrees, Aaron.
Well,
Not C's. Not C's. I had to get a B.
Thingies don't get degrees, where I came from. But okay, so Texas Killing Fields, the movie. In the Texas bayous, a local homicide detective teams up with a cop from New York City to investigate a series of unsolved murders. It was directed by Ami Canaan Mann and starred Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Sam Worthington, Jessica Chastain, and Chloe Grace Moretz from 2011. Now I'm going to tell you my thoughts on the movie. I didn't like it at all. A problem. I thought the performances were okay, but I want to say I do think that might have been influenced. Two things. I don't think it's a great movie. There's a lot of cliches involved and that sort of thing, but it's not a bad movie. But when you're watching it after you've done a lot of looking up of so many elements of these cases, it was kind of irritating. And I understand why a lot of the families were kind of offended by this movie because they felt like it was kind of taking away and trying to commercialize their pain is how some felt when it came out. I get that because I feel like you're not even really touching on any of what happened here. You're just saying, this is where bodies got dumped. They made your own story. Just made a whole fictional story about this real life murder location.
Yes, and we were actually talking about this offline before we started the podcast, but we were debating, I guess, the definition or the source in reference, what people are referencing when they talk about Texas killing fields. Mm-hmm. And it is very much the title of that location, but there's the people, you know what I mean? It's also the people that were left there, that were kidnapped and their families destroyed. But I also, caveat, we're also the type to say, like, be creative with your stories and use your vision. But I think this is one where it's like, at least give us some of the real truth. Don't just take the location piece of it and leave the people piece out.
Well, the thing,
because then it's disrespectful.
As a movie, it irritated me because everything is solved by happenstance, and nothing drives me more nuts in a movie than when happenstance is what solves your crime. He has this weird relationship with this girl, and coincidentally,
super weird.
Her family and friends are the murderers. Like, it's ridiculous.
Irony.
And none of it, it's stupid. There's not, it's not irony. That's just dumb. It's just so coincidental. And it's just like, oh, it all connects. And those are the kind of murder mysteries that drive me nuts when it's way too coincidental happenstance. And I did like Worthington. I did like Morgan. I really like Jessica Chastain, except I don't get why she just beats the shit out of her first interrogation person. Like she, right off the bat, is just like, bam, I'm in it. I mean, she doesn't even ask any questions before she's torturing
Different time,
people.
Aaron. Different time.
You know what, man? I think she should beat the shit out of whoever she wants to beat the shit out of. I'm not going to get in her way.
Understood. And please don't take that. If you guys both seem to have enjoyed it, and I'm not trying to yuck
Stop
your
putting
yum.
words in my mouth. I didn't even say that. I just said that I liked the two performances.
I enjoyed it.
John really liked it.
I really liked the movie. I really enjoyed it. And I was in a place where I was watching it where I'm like, wow, Sam Worthington's really doing something here, as opposed to what he normally does, which is like, hey, I'm Sam Worthington. He's actually showing up. I really love the fact that every single place he walked into, people were just pissed that he was around. I didn't even understand it. I'm like, why are they always mad at him? Like, what did he do in this town where everyone's automatically mad at him? And then he gives his buddy his dog, and just like his buddy's running off into the swamp with his dog. That's a great relationship. I don't trust anyone with my dogs without vetting them pretty well, especially out in the middle of Texas.
I mean, these are all fair points. I will say Worthington is a better actor than a lot of people give him credit for. If you ever saw Under the Banner of Heaven with Andrew Garfield, he was excellent in that. As a Mormon leader, I thought he was excellent in that. I think he's good here, but he is the character is so similar to Russell Crowe in L.A. Confidential. Like, it just feels like the exact same character to me personally. Jeffrey D. Morgan, I get it. You're a fan. I'm the same way with Kurt Russell. Anything he does, love it. Even if it's not magical, I still love it. He felt like Jeffrey Dean Morgan to me. It felt like most of the performances.
Yeah, but we love Jeffrey Dean Morgan being Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
I like Negan Jeffrey Dean Morgan more than I like just Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Or the comedian.
I don't like Negan Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I like the guy when he was acting, when he was able to show up and just do some acting. Sure, you can say, well, he just seems like he's being Jeffrey Dean Morgan, but he's not, because this is still in the era where he's just coming off of being on Supernatural and doing a couple other things. Like, he's not really hitting it hard as far as like big roles for him. He was on Grey's Anatomy, if I remember correctly, which I didn't even watch the show. I know he was on there. Like, there's a lot of times where I'm like, why this guy yeah, he should be a much bigger actor than especially then than he was. And I thought that this would have been a great way to really propel him forward. I'm just disappointed to see it didn't do much for him, at least in the time, because I thought he was great. I thought he was engaging. I thought Chloe Grace Moretz, as much as like, it was like, why is she here? Why aren't we just investigating regular murders? Why are we constantly saving this? It
reminded me of the same storyline with Frozen Ground. Remember that, where Nicolas Cage is trying to save?
No.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Reminded me of that. You said no?
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about.
We did that movie.
We watched that movie.
What are you talking about, though?
The same similar storyline about Nicolas Cage and Vanessa Hudgens in terms of having this relationship with a girl where it's very happenstance and it really just goes in a weird direction narratively.
Yeah, I feel like it's still different.
Totally different, because this girl ends up being related to the killers. It's the dumbest plot turn ever. And I know I keep saying, like, John, I don't want to make you feel bad, because I know you love it. If you love it, you love it. On the same token, I'm not going to change how I feel about it. And I was mad watching it. I was just like, what? What are we doing now? And it got funny after a while. I started doing shots every time I had a dumb plot turn. And I'm
not going to sit there and say that I'm surprised by the fact that the people who ended up being the killers are the killers. Like that, I'm not surprised in any way, shape, or form.
But you should be, because it's dumb. Like,
well,
it's not like, here's the thing. It's like, the girl wasn't part of the case. Like, it's not that they came to her because of some connection to something. They just had this relationship before the movie even really got going. Right?
Yeah, it was super weird.
So, and
now you're talking.
And then coincidentally, they know the exact gas station she's at.
Now you're really starting to talk to me. Now I'm starting to get mad at this movie.
And what gets him shot is because she gets kidnapped in a grocery store. Apparently, people are following the cop around. How the hell did they know they were going to be at this grocery store?
Exactly.
Or this Quick Mart or whatever. Like, I can go to stuff, John. That's what I'm saying. Like, all
the
the
lady
places.
in the store, she's like, yeah, it sounded like there was some fighting or altercation.
Yeah.
You didn't look into it?
The store
That's
is
your
the size
job.
of Quick Stop, man. Where where are you looking?
Circle K has bigger gas stations.
Okay, now I'm starting to not like the movie nearly as much, and I'm starting to remember one of the things that drove me nuts was Jason Clarke and his partner. Jason Clarke, who's running around with white supremacist tattoos, and his partner is a black guy, and it's like, okay, well, how did this relationship happen? And everyone's surprised that he turns around and kills the black guy when the black guy stands up for himself. It's like, okay, well, he's already
right,
and then we did just drop the story.
Well, they're trying to say, well, look, there's a couple killers in these fields. Oh, big twist. Sure, great. That's great. The only thing about the movie that I was like, that's good, I like that, is the scene, and not in a way that I genuinely liked it. It was pretty terrifying, I thought. But the scene where the woman is assaulted in her house with the baby, and
that was so good.
And she thought that she got rid of one because there were two people there. Oh my God, that was so creepy. It was chills.
Very tense.
That was very
chills.
well done.
It was. Until the cops get there, and apparently they're just hanging the fuck around, and the killers are just waiting for someone to come chase them.
So that they can hit him with a shovel.
It's so weird.
All right, I don't like the movie anymore.
You know what I'm
saying? Can we also talk about how she called out the detectives in their office about not doing shit? She's like, why are we sitting in here talking about this when you could be out there trying to catch them?
Well,
like,
that just sounded very realistic to me.
That sounded kind of realistic.
That was like, you know.
No, I'm just saying I like that she called him out like, this is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Can we get going?
This is the way it would work. Like, you have two guys who are like, you know, I know she just got attacked in her house or anything, but let's just start questioning her about her life and her things and like what she did wrong to piss off people. And it's like, dude, can we just listen to the woman? Can we just listen to the woman and get some work done here?
That's not how it works with women. In this world.
Literally the one character I really cared about because of that horrible encounter in her house, because I was so freaking terrified. That's my nightmare, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
I finally beat one back, and then another one is already there, and I'm like, where do they come from? How did they get in here?
Yeah, I have a personal. That's okay.
Because I thought it was really terrible editing. I thought it was terrible editing. Oh, you have a personal account in your own history, right? Like your grandma.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah, my nan was hurt. Someone broke into her house and beat her with a hammer in her head, choked her with the phone cord, drug her outside, left her body there, like crazy stuff. She ended up living because she beat the shit out of them, but trying to like RAPE an elderly woman is just also gross, and all of that to steal cars. So yeah, one of my big fears, and it probably was because I saw all the blood in the house, is someone breaking in and hurting me or attacking me. So scary. So the people who lived through like those situations, those are real heroes to me. Because how did you get past that mentally?
Well,
yeah, because I'm not sure I could take a hammer to the head and still keep fighting. It's going to take me a minute.
Yeah, and they said she would have died if she didn't fight back, but she was a bad bitch.
That's a bad bitch.
Was it a right-handed hammer or a left-handed hammer?
Can they have different ones?
No, they don't.
Okay. I was like, do they have left-handed hammers? Because I feel like the functionality is the same.
This is a true story, not to sidetrack, but I'm already here and I couldn't get the joke out of my head, and I apologize. Dire circumstances should not be making jokes, but it made me laugh. I am very, used to be pretty unhandy is a word I would to use lightly. I got much better.
Unhandy?
Unhandy. Not handy. I just wasn't handy. And my best friend is the handiest of all handy. He just can build and do anything. He's just miraculous. And once he was doing something in my house and I couldn't get the nail in the frickin' thing. And I'm like, I can't get this nail in. He goes, are you using a right-handed hammer? And I immediately looked at it and I'm like, I don't know, am I? Because I'm left-handed. So.
That's so funny.
To this day, he will bring that up whenever he wants to point out I'm stupid.
As he should.
As he should. Him. Well, some fun facts in the movie. In preparation for the role, Cheryl Lee and Chloe Grace Moretz spent time in a rehabilitation center for drug addicts.
I do like that. They get some exposure to what the real experiences are.
Agreed. And I think Cheryl Lee, by the way, is a much better actress than she's ever been given credit for.
Oh, sorry. I know you're talking about facts.
Sure.
Can we also talk about how quickly these women gave up who the pimp was? That doesn't happen like that.
It's like, Michael, it was him. Yeah, that guy right there.
Yeah, so his name, what he looks like the one part where there was a woman and she's like, hey, shh, stop talking, type of thing. Okay, that one a little bit different. I can see that woman is like more of a chatty Cathy. But this was like, hey, you're in a literal house for women who are in the sex work / being trafficked. So you want to give up who this girl's pimp was that hit her? Oh, yeah, it was this boy over here. No, because she's going to get her ass beat for that. Absolutely not. This would happen.
This isn't a movie, and people are cooperative in movies. All right, they want to catch the perp.
Okay. Well, it was stupid. Sorry, I just thought about that, and I had to bring it up.
Man, I'm telling you, you would be just punch drunk if you really did a shot every time you took a bad plot turn in this thing. So, although the film is set to be set among the Texas bayous, the real area known as the Texas Killing Fields is more of a low-lying, grassy or marshlands area. And because Houston to the north is more known for the bayous. This film was actually filmed entirely in Louisiana for a swampier look. Other fun facts, when the film was first announced, Bradley Cooper was cast in the main role alongside Sam Worthington, so you wouldn't have got Jeffrey Dean Morgan, John. You would have gotten the Coops.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad I got Jeffrey Dean Morgan, even though now I don't like this movie anymore.
Sorry.
I was really enjoying the fact that I'm like, you know what? I watched something, and I had a good time with it, and I thought it was excellent. And then because I just released everything. I just let go of any sort of disbelief or anything else like that. I just allowed myself to be in the moment, and now I'm like, God damn it, the stupid moment.
I apologize if I ruined a great moment for you. Captain Brian Goshius and Mike Land, who they dedicated their careers to trying to solve a lot of these mysteries along Interstate Highway 45. They were actually on as consultants while making the movie. I don't know why, but they were there. I guess just to point them down the right road. Because
that's not even the right road.
That's a joke. There's no other facts there.
Yeah.
Come on, the movie's fictional. Okay, see, that's the downside.
Yeah.
This is where the laugh track would be very handy. It would be very handy.
How does it feel for someone to not laugh at your jokes, Aaron?
I don't like it.
He can just edit the laugh in. Really He's got like a collection of everyone's laughs somewhere. He can just like,
that's probably what he does.
Dude,
a perfectly good place
why
for
haven't
right
I
here.
done that? that would jazz up even the worst recording. Lastly, the families of a lot of the victims were very irritated with this movie because it doesn't really shine a light on the truth.
Yeah, understandably so.
But Tim Miller, who's the father of Laura Miller, who we talked about, and we're still debating hero or not, he said in an interview with CBS News, people, you never know, might just go and see the movie and go, oh, I remember when someone went down in the fields and I remember a certain car and a certain person seemed a little dodgy. Maybe a family can then know what happened to their daughter. When you put it in that perspective, it makes me appreciate the movie a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I like the movie is that with 40 plus cases involved here, it would be hard to really make a movie about 40 plus cases. But if you can make a movie that inspires people to either A, research, or B, become cops, or C, have a memory about some sort of situation that happened in that area that might be helpful, that's almost more powerful than trying to tell the whole story itself.
Fair enough.
That is fair.
On that same note, do you guys think the movie respected the victims? Do you understand where the families are coming from that were offended?
By not mentioning the victims or the actual victims, they're serving the victims better than mentioning them.
And getting it wrong. I'm just thinking out loud, sorry. Because they still got it wrong. I mean, if they mentioned the victims and then they told a fictional story using their names, that would be terrible.
Yeah, that'd be horrible.
Yeah.
Then you have people who are associating the wrong facts to the people's names, and then
sure.
None of that actually comes out. But I think the idea of, like I mentioned, inspiring people to go above and beyond what they would normally would by telling a story that is related to truth, that has much more power to it. So maybe in that respect, it is respecting the victims to allow people to come to it on their own terms.
I still feel like it was a disservice to the victims, though.
I do too, personally. But I get it. I mean, I get what Tim Miller's saying.
I don't think they have to integrate the individual stories or anything, but I think do a better job of explaining what happened, where things got, where it was at, instead of making up this almost entirely false narrative, because it was also not good.
So what would you guys have done different? How would you change the story, I suppose? Because I guess my take would be I would probably tell the Calder Road portion of the murders and tell that story, how they seem to be connected. There was one conviction, but you would have to, I think to be fair, go out of your way to illustrate why he hasn't been charged with anything else, to show that there's not enough evidence to say that.
That's basically the documentary. So good job. They owe you royalties.
So you would go a different way?
I would. I still would like it to be more, have some dramatized elements, but similar to you, where it's like following the progression. But I think more of different detectives that work on it throughout the years, and then the cases go cold, and then someone's putting the pieces together. Like that piece of the story where it becomes more of a mystery and we're putting the puzzle pieces together, which is really what happened. I think that would have done better. And then you can honor them in different ways throughout the film. You could find ways to do it. I don't have the creative idea right now, but even if you were to go over at the end of the film, here's all the cases, every case, and where it's at.
I would still maintain the idea of let's not tell the story of the actual victims, but let's inspire people. So I'd still go down that route. So I would take this movie and write it better so that people that are like Aaron or Amanda can appreciate it more, in the sense of like it doesn't have a lot of happenstance being what solves the case. But I would try to keep the cast as much as possible, but I would just make it more like a definitive investigation case, as opposed to like, so we sort of got this going on. Oh, look, you sort of have this going on. Oh, look, you're just mad at people. I don't even know why the little girl's running around. Okay, cool. I would just take away a lot of those elements that are unnecessary and make sure that they're focusing on the investigation itself.
And maybe have someone ask Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character, hey, cop, why are you taking such a weird interest in this girl? Because
literally,
it's odd, It's a little odd.
They never tell that story. And there's
a lot of stories they don't tell weird in this movie. Sorry.
I'm so mad now. I really liked this movie before.
You could go back to I like a lot of stupid movies. Ford Fairlane's one of my favorites, and that's dumb as hell.
Yeah, but no one's sitting there solving crime based off Ford Fairlane.
He's solving rock and roll crimes, my friend. All right?
Oh.
He's the world's greatest rock and roll detective.
My mistake. Oi!
Oh! All right. So that's going to do it for this episode. I don't know how we ended on Andrew Dice Clay, but we did. So thanks for listening. And remember, we're going to be off until April, so we're going to be off for a little bit, but we will be back. Hit subscribe. Tell your friends. Get people to listen to the show. That would be great. To come back and have more people listening would be amazing. So if you could share the show, we would appreciate it. Anything from you guys? Thank you, John, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Amanda, thank you for being here.
My movie.
As always.
And for sharing your thingies.
Don't put it like that.
Exactly.
Thingies.
Exactly. Don't ever put it like that. That's it. And for myself, thank you guys as well. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting the show and sharing the show. I hope you guys are enjoying it. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, please, again, keep sharing it on social media and give us a review in your favorite podcast app, because you definitely are the best source of promotion. Not saying that just because those 5-star reviews and everything in Apple Podcasts and all the other podcast apps help our show grow. So if you could, it would be great. And tell your true crime maniac friends about us. Thanks for listening to Inspired by a True Story. Now, let's keep those artists honest.